Hello, this is Jay Mitchell, and we are back from another episode of the Libertarian Uncensored podcast, going over all the posts on the Libertarian Uncensored subreddit. Let's get right into it. So first we have the Libertarian plan to conscript homeowners into homeowners associations. Cross-posted title, not mine. And that was posted by CH4 Locks, and that looks like it's a let's see, it's a cover of a magazine, Regulation by the Cato Institute, and it says the cover says who should control the internet, typically assigning rights, and yeah, I don't know what that's what has to do with homeowner associations, but yeah, my personal thoughts on homeowners associations are, if people want to join a homeowners association, they should be able to, but I don't think people should be forced to join an HOA if they don't want to. Personally, HOAs, they might not be government tyranny, but just because tyranny is private doesn't mean it's not still tyranny. That's something that a lot of libertarians get caught up on. They think when it's government tyranny, it's the worst thing ever, but when it's private tyranny, it's okay. I do think private tyranny, if you're not forced to interact with it, then that's a case for it not being a tyranny. But if you are forced to interact with it, if you're forced to join an HOA, then I personally think that's just as tyrannical as as government tyranny, and that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Trump and Trumpism have changed the original concept of libertarian means to conservative ends into a new concept of authoritarian means to Christian nationalist ends, finds a new study from journals.stagepub.com, and that's a post from CH4 Locks, and that's the study says, making fusionism great again, authoritarian means to Christian nationalist ends. And yeah, personally, I would say that the GOP has always been more authoritarian and Christian nationalist than ever libertarian and conservative, despite what Reddit narratives would say. Reddit back when he was president, Reddit thought George W. Bush was the worst thing ever, but now that he's been out of power, suddenly they prefer him over Trump, and that just goes to show you that Reddit will follow whatever the current narrative is. They'll go after whoever the current boogeyman is, and yeah, just because I wouldn't consider Trump a Christian nationalist at all. He barely knows any Bible verses, and he's much more concerned about his own cult of personality and only uses Christianity as kind of a means to an end than anything else. So I personally would say George W. Bush and Ronald Reagan were probably, George W. Bush's father as well, they were all probably much better Christian nationalists than Donald Trump, because they actually use Christianity a bit more quite in their rhetoric and speech than Donald Trump does. But of course on Reddit, the current thing is always going to be the worst thing, and we're always going to throw out the buzzwords like authoritarian Christian nationalist whenever anyone dissents at all. And that's why, you can't really take Reddit seriously. It's a bunch of keyboard warriors who think they're these revolutionaries, but in reality, they can't leave their house if their life depended on it. Then we have top Democratic senator goes on wildly racist tirade against Zoran Mamdani from HuffPost.com, post from Donald Key, and it's a post about how Kristen Gillibrand apparently went on a tirade about Zoran Mamdani. I personally don't care about Mamdani, but you should be focusing on his on his shitty socialist policies rather than his religion or race. That's just the identity politics trap that a lot of people fall into these days. They get so distracted by what people's skin color or religion is that they completely ignore all the shitty policies that they endorse. And that's not the libertarian position. The libertarian position is focused on the policy, not a person, or not the person's skin color or their religion. And that's my thoughts on that issue. And we have the Trump administration is building a national citizenship data system from NPR.org, posted by Zachness. And yeah, I personally think that's just another fear-mongering headline. The government already has tons of data systems, but they only care when Trump ever does them, and I don't think Trump, and they already, and that's only because he's a member of the out group rather than the in group. I'm sure if Kamala Harris was doing a national citizenship data system, They think it's the greatest thing ever. And yeah, it also ignores how, the United States historically has had tons of national databases. They've had a census every 10 years since 1790, and also, they've had the Social Security is it's going to turn 90 next month, and that's another thing that they have a giant government database for. But yeah, those government databases are okay, but these ones are where they draw the line because the orange man's doing them, and that just goes to show you they're not principled. They just don't like whatever the orange man does. They're fine with government tyranny as long as it's their side doing it. It's like when they have the No Kings protest after because the orange man's in power, but they would never have a No Kings protest during Biden's presidency, even though I would make the argument that his presidency was arguably just as, if not more, authoritarian than Trump's. And that's my thoughts on that issue. And we have the dollar is off to its worst start in a year since Bretton Woods ended in 1973, and that's a cross post from the We the Fifth subreddit posted by CH4Locks. And yeah, of course, this is another Reddit doomer headline. Oh, our society's collapsing. But yeah, so the dollar, sometimes it's gonna go down, and that's how economics works. But of course, Reddit, everything was fine during Joe Biden, even though inflation was running rampant. But now that the orange man's back in power, suddenly everything's collapsing, and that just goes to show you, it's just the same headlines over and over again. Orange man bad, Republicans bad. I don't care for either of those, but it just goes to show you that, it's pretty much just generic shit lib circle jerk at this point, which is it's really sad, because, it's like 95% of subreddits at this point. I definitely do think there's, if some subreddits were like that, it's fine, but, when it's pretty much every subreddit, it gets tiresome after a while, especially one that brands itself as Libertarian and Uncensored. It's kind of like the Holy Roman Empire and being nothing that it claims to be. It's neither libertarian nor uncensored, just like the Holy Roman Empire was neither holy nor Roman nor an empire. Then we have you get an EV, everybody below the poverty line gets an EV, posted by Spare Simeon, and that's a YouTube video from Reason TV, the worst electric vehicle program ever. And yeah, personally, I think the libertarian position is to be fully against subsidies. I don't think the government should be subsidizing electric vehicles, just like I don't think they should be subsidizing gas-powered vehicles. But, ultimately, if the government wants to justify subsidizing what everyone subsidizes, that's on them. Just be aware that, the government, it's just for big business, including with big government, like it always does. And yeah, I think it's interesting, Reddit was super critical of Tesla when Reddit loved Tesla and wanted government subsidies for it, but then Elon joined the political outgroup and suddenly Tesla was the worst thing ever and they were burning them. But now it seems like they're going back the other way, where they say, oh, EVs are the greatest thing ever, and that just goes to show you these people aren't principled. They'll just follow whatever the narrative is. Then we have 63025, costs are way down, posted by CH4Locks, and that's a truth from Donald Trump. The Trump administration has gotten costs down very substantially for the American consumer. There has never been anything like this, and yeah, personally, that's just Trump trying to make himself look good. But, when if Biden was saying that, or if Kamala was saying that, if she was president, Reddit would be saying, yeah, costs are way down. But when Trump says it, it's just fake news. That just goes to show you, they don't. If I personally think, inflation seems to have receded a bit from the Biden years. But, since the out-group's doing it rather than the in-group, that's suddenly bad. And that just goes to show you that, Reddit doesn't care about anything other than its partisan narratives. And yeah, personally, I do think, the president doesn't control the economy, and even if costs are down, that doesn't mean that Trump's directly responsible. But, Reddit, they definitely want you to think that, it's in spite of Trump that prices are going down, not because of him. And, yeah, if Biden was still in power, if Kamala was in power, it would be because of, the Reddit narrative would be, the prices are going down because of them. But since Trump's in power, it's the opposite, and that just goes to show you, Reddit cares nothing, as I said earlier, about anything but its own partisan narratives. And I think we're going to wrap it up there. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.